Is it better to play with a heavy racket or a light racket? Today we are gonna discover the pros and cons of playing with a light and a heavy racket so that you can make the right choice. Also, what weight do the best players in the world use? Hello all players, I'm Pablo and I welcome you to a new 4Set. To choose a paddle racket correctly, you must take into consideration many aspects. The price, the materials, the shape, but there is another one that is super important too. The weight. What weight should we use for our racket? This is the universal question. But the quickest answer is use as much weight as you can without losing agility. But this has many aspects that we need to understand. Why use as much weight as you can? Newton's second law explained it years ago. The greater the mass, the more force we will be able to transmit to the ball as long as we have the same acceleration. A racket of 500 grams is gonna be more powerful than a racket of 300 grams because it has more mass. But we will not be able to accelerate the racket at the same speed, so it will be counterproductive. The key is to find the highest possible weight in our racket and be able to move it with the same acceleration. I am talking about the total weight of our racket, but it is equally important to know how the weight is distributed, and that is called balance. But before we understand what is balance, don't forget to subscribe to the channel if you love paddle and you have learned something new with this video. The balance in a paddle racket can be defined as the point of equilibrium of all its weight. There will be rackets with a higher balance or a lower balance, and this directly affects the agility. A racket with high balance will mean that most of the weight will be away from the hand, and to grip something that is away from you means you lose agility and control. But how can you know the balance of your racket? Place it on a table, swing the racket until you find the balance point and measure it. If it measures between 25 and 27 centimeters, it will have a low balance. But if it measures more than 27 centimeters, the balance will be high. We already know that there are two important aspects to take into consideration: the total weight and the balance. But what are the pros and cons of using a heavy paddle racket? Let's start with the pros, and as I mentioned before, if we get the same acceleration with a racket of 375 grams than with a racket of 365, we will get more power. Therefore, the first benefit of a heavy racket is the power. At the same time, if we use a heavier racket, we will get more stiffness. But what does stiffness give us in a racket? More control. Imagine blocking the ball after an opponent's bandeja. If we do it with a heavy racket, the force of the incoming ball will not affect us as much, so we will have more control. Also, by having more stiffness, we will have less vibrations with the shot. However, as we will see later, this doesn't mean that it is better for less injuries. Another benefit from heavy rackets is the resistance. There are some rackets that, to make them very light, the brand used less carbon fiber layers on it. This can make a racket easier to break. But obviously this doesn't mean that a heavy racket will not break, but it can help. Let's go with an easy tip. If you play in areas with high humidity or near the sea, try to play with heavy rackets. The ball in humid conditions slows down and the game doesn't benefit fast movements. Everything looks positive with heavy rackets. Don't they have any disadvantage? Of course they do. If we play with an extremely heavy racket, the first thing we will notice is a loss of agility. This loss of agility will be reflected in our game in a very obvious way. The timing of contact with the ball will not be correct. Our arm will not be able to move the racket at the speed we need, and we will impact late and wrong. To try to solve this, we will make extra efforts that can lead us to injuries. For example, imagine yourself playing with a 1 kilogram paddle racket. Could you do a good vibra? The most visual example is this one. If we don't control the weight, we will feel how we cannot hit the ball in time. So now it's time to talk about light rackets. Do they have any benefits? Yes, many. So let's start with the main benefit, that is agility. Because using a light racket will give us an extra agility. So what can we get if we move the racket faster? First of all, the timing of the shot. We will be able to hit each ball at the right moment with less effort thanks to a higher acceleration. Imagine your opponents attacking the net with volleys and you defending. If your opponents are good, they will try to move you and make you uncomfortable in your defensive zone. That extra agility with a light racket will allow you to still hit the sweet spot more easily. Another benefit of having more agility is the spin. In order to add spin to the ball, we need to move the racket quickly. If we cannot move the racket quickly, the ball will generally have flat spin but not slice or top spin. For shots like this Mass Portres or Vivora, where we need to add a lot of spin to the ball, agility is very important. As we will see later, Juan Lebron, that is one of the best players in the world, used a light racket. Another benefit of agility has to do with reflexes. How many times are we close to the net and we need to hit the ball thanks to our reflexes? This can happen when we block a bajada or a vívora of the opponent, or also very important, in the volley. When all 4 players are at the net, the most important factor there is the agility. Let's go with a quick tip. If you play paddle in a high altitudes area, a lighter racket can suit you better. In these areas, the ball weighs less and the game becomes faster. And if the game becomes faster, the agility of a light racket is very important. But what are the main disadvantages of a light racket? As we said before, sometimes a light racket incorporates less materials than other ones. This can make them to break faster. Also, by having less mass, we will notice that it is more difficult to generate power in our shots. To avoid this, or to be able to block an opponent's shots, we will grip the racket harder, and this can lead to injuries. Alright, we already know the main benefits and disadvantages of light and heavy rackets. But what way do the top professional paddle players play with? Because we can find players who likes more heavy rackets and others that do the opposite. For example, Fernando Belasteguin, the legend, plays with rackets of 380 grams. A little heavier, Ale Galán uses 383 grams in his racket, being one of the players with the heaviest racket. Sancho Gutiérrez used to play with 390 gram racket, but he has been reducing the weight and now plays with 377 grams in total. Juan Lebron is one of the players with the lowest racket weight with a total of 370 grams. Javi Letal or Javi Leal, one of the best mass players, plays with only 365 grams. And Agustín Tapia uses 373, while Arturo Coello uses 378. And now, what weight should you use in your racket? The best thing to do is to try different weights. Try to play with heavy rackets and see if you can accelerate enough. And if not, keep reducing the weight. But remember, balance is just as important as the total weight of the racket. Do you have any question? Leave them in the comments. Thanks for watching the video, don't forget to subscribe and see you in the next one. Ciao!